Oh, thank you. Okay. Let's see.
Testing, 1, 2.
All right.
Great, thank you. Yep.
Wow, this is like intense.
Friend there.
Yeah, there's an intense amount of wires up here. Is there a better place to plug this in? It keeps yeah, it keeps like pulling out but just a power adapter. Yeah. Okay. God damn it. Awesome. Yeah, it just doesn't like to stay in with the display port thing, so it's like, yeah, it's insane.
Can it go in either way? Though?
Yeah, it can, but it's just tricky like that. Yeah.
Don't worry about it. I'll figure it out.
Okay. Oh yeah. That would be cool.
Okay, good.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Oh, wow.
Aha. Yeah, sure.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to the NYU Tandon School of Engineering Maker event space. We're very pleased to have a special guest tonight, Nicholas KAMUDA, the creative director of the Microsoft HoloLens. And this event was made possible by the Integrated Digital Media Program in the Technology, Culture, and Society Department at NYU Tandon. And my name is Dana Karwas, and I teach the User Experience Design course in the Integrated Digital Media Program. And we had Nicholas as our guest critic today because our students worked for, I think, 8 or 9 weeks on a project to design an artist portfolio on the HoloLens. So the development was done in Unity, and we just presented to him. So congratulations to my students. You guys did a wonderful job. We should give them a round of applause. So he's going to present, and then we'll have time for questions afterwards. Thank you all for coming.
Yeah. Thank you, guys, and thanks to everybody who presented earlier. For those of you who weren't at the crit, you missed it. I basically thought it was awesome and thought everybody did an amazing job. Tons of constraints, new medium, hard problems, all this stuff. We'll talk a little bit about those things tonight, but it was awesome to see the work. Really, really cool to see the thoughts. It gave me a lot to take back to the team. So I'm going to talk about a few things now, but then afterwards you can just let me know any other questions you have. For a show of hands, how many people have used a HoloLens before or tried it? Okay, so we're like half. Somebody's got a box, like literally like just got one. Vive and Oculus. Vive and Oculus people, couple. Daydream or Gear VR. Nintendo Virtual Boy? Not really? Okay, cool. That's good. It's always good context. It's tough to level set. All right, so it's 1980. I realize that's probably a ways back for most of you, potentially even before you were born. But I want to talk about the best product in 1980 to build VR experiences, just for start, because this is where I came from. And maybe you can guess what it is, but maybe you can't guess what it is. But my thought about what it is Legos. 1979, Lego introduced the minifig, which they call this little guy. They had huge people before, and they standardized and shrunk them into these minifigures. And so in 1979, you saw this huge growth of Lego sets coming out. This is Moonbase Alpha. They also had the much want police department playset, and then the slightly more esoteric Knights Procession. But you could see, like, after they were able to standardize, they kind of rapidly expanded. From their perspective, I don't think Lego was really meant to be virtual reality, but from my perspective, it shares a lot of the same hallmarks, right? It's world building, it's all spatial storytelling, there's all these rich sensory details here. And then, of course, personalization and spatial memory. And if you worked in VR, then you know spatial memory is super important, right? How else could me and my cousins find anything in this crazy mess without spatial memory? So I was a pretty restless world builder. This is me. This is my old dog's dish. We labeled it so she knew it was hers. If Lego didn't have what I wanted, I added cardboard tubes from paper towel rolls. And if that didn't work, I drew on pieces of plywood to make new landscapes or added clay for the Legos to sit. So I was constantly trying new things, but my whole scope was these Lego sets. So you can ask, what does this have to do with any of the Rs? I actually just learned about this R recently. It's like they're multiplying. I knew about these three. This one was new to me. And then you could also ask, well, who are you? And Dana, thank you for introducing me, but I can talk a little bit more about that. Yeah, my name is Nick KAMUDA. I'm a design director at Microsoft. My team is called the Sensory Design Team, and we work on mixed reality at Microsoft. Basically, our job is to do the sights and the sounds and the feel of what mixed reality is. We do a lot, but if you've seen either of these products, then you understand roughly where we are. On the left is the HoloLens, which I can't believe it. It's amazing. So many people in this room have used it. It's the first time that I've been outside of the office with that number of people raising their hands about the HoloLens. And this one's a little less well known. This is a development kit that was announced a couple months ago and is coming out later this summer. This is a headset by Acer. Uses the same OS as HoloLens, but does it in a more virtual reality way. So these are the kind of things that we do. But I figure maybe it's worth taking a second and stepping back a little more to establish some context about what mixed reality is. I know most of you are probably in the thick of it, but maybe there's some people who have less exposure. So on one hand, if you imagine that there's this physical world of atoms and quanta that we all know about, and you kind of take that, and then you think about, on the other hand, there may be this possibility for these other virtual worlds of visualizations and simulations. They could be invented, they could be simulated. I think my Lego story maybe somewhat irresponsibly suggests that these virtual worlds may be made of plastic, but for our purposes, let's say that they're made of bits. It's actually a medium with far more plasticity than plastic itself, which is kind of funny. So now imagine that you're over here and you can start to hear or see or smell or otherwise sense things from these imagined or constructed worlds over here, right? And that spectrum is what we think of as mixed reality. At Microsoft, we think that there's a lot of opportunity for devices and experiences in this spectrum that help people out in terms of their work and their play, lets them experience new things. So those are the kinds of things that we're talking about. we didn't make up mixed reality. I think some people from the program know this. Shannon, you definitely, I saw it in your thesis. Paul Milgram and Fumio Kishino coined this term in 1994 just to talk about this exact spectrum. So without going into too many details about this, I'll just forge ahead as to what we think in my team in Microsoft about mixed reality. We generally break it down into these three things. Like, it's helpful when you're working with a lot of people like we are to simplify things as much as you can. So we generally think of mixed reality in terms of the people and places and things that make it up. And I got a little video to show that. So we're all people. We have things. We exist in places. And in HoloLens V1, what we wanted to do was bring virtual things into those environments with us to sit alongside the physical things and to actually be used alongside the physical things as well. We had something that we used to call the peanut butter and jelly test, which was a hologram was good if you could make a peanut butter jelly sandwich and use the hologram at the same time. And so that was kind of our approach to thinking about mixing these things, right? What we've been working on now is bringing those same people and places and things into the virtual world. So we want to take those same raw elements, the same OS, the same development platform, importantly, and the same end user mental models, and bring them across virtual worlds as well as the physical world. So this is kind of how we describe things. But the last piece is the kind of connectivity and intelligence that we expect from our digital networks today, right? We have these pieces and people, places, and things, and that's how the real world works. But I think the magic comes when we start to connect those things, and we get real network gains and economies of scale from doing that. So, you know, all of this being said, it's still pretty early, and this is just our definition. So I have a feeling that over the next couple of years, there are going to be a lot more definitions that emerge, and there'll be a lot of helpful simplifications about what this technology is and what it's good for, and I'm looking at you guys to help figure out what that is. So, you know, this kind of begs the question, too, does it have to be live to be mixed reality? And I'll just touch on this for a second. But last week at a Microsoft education event here in New York, we introduced this. You can't really see it. Maybe you can. This thing, which is mixed reality through a normal RGB webcam in a Surface Book. This will be coming out shortly. Maybe it's already out, and I don't know about it. But this girl, Megan, she's really in the room, and this Mars rover is not really in the room. And so at the time of creation or at the time of viewing through the tablet, people are able to add holograms or add objects into their scene. So this question then makes me think of another question, which is then, are all memes really just mixed reality? Or is there still room for special effects? I don't know. So yeah, it's early. But I think instead of diving too deep into the technical details, I would like to maybe talk a little more about why we're doing this and why it's important. So to do that, I'm going to tell 3 stories, and stick with me. It's kind of a long presentation. The first story is a story about you guys. The second story is a story about all of us, and then the last story is about me. Can we dim the lights at all? Is that going to be terrible for the video? Not great for the video. Okay, we'll just do it for a second then. Or maybe we're not going to. Okay, that's okay too. So okay, firstly, a story about you. Ooh, nice. Yes. Ooh, that's good. Okay, so settle in and get comfortable. If you're a person who's done meditation or is just oddly calm as an individual, then maybe you'll know where I'm going with this. But first, hang with me. For a second, I'd love everybody to just kind of close their eyes and then sort of from the top of your head, working your way down, I want you to try to visualize and feel what each part of your body is doing. So starting with your hair and down through your eyebrows, your temples, through your eyes. Maybe you can feel the pressure behind your eyes, through your ears. Pretend that you can feel your ears. Then through your nose and breathe in, and your mouth. Down through your shoulders, and your forearms and wrists, your hands, your core, and then down through your hips and your thighs, and your ankles, and all the way to your feet. Okay, thank you. The point of all of this is that we all have these amazing kinesthetic abilities and sensory abilities, and maybe as we were doing that exercise, you felt them a little more than you did with your eyes open and all your senses coming in, right? Maybe when we were talking about your ears, you were able to hear things or pick up things in the environment, besides just my voice, that you hadn't heard before. Or when we were talking about your mouths and your noses, maybe there were smells or tastes that you remembered, or that you thought you could feel, or that you actually felt. So I think this is pretty amazing. This range of motion and this range of sensory abilities that we have, they help us learn to perceive the world and understand and navigate the world, and they help us accomplish these really complex tasks. First of all, I love to cook, okay? So I'm gonna talk about cooking a little bit right now. This is Francis Mallman on the left. He's, I think he's kind of a dick, but at least I don't know him personally, but that's what I get. He has this amazing ability to take raw fire and tame it and work it into these amazing meals. And this is me on the right, and my ability with fire is like much less compared to Francis Mallman. But the idea is, like, without this range of motion, without these sensory abilities, can't imagine accomplishing as complex a task as taking raw fire and raw food and turning it into something that's delicious and something that's not going to kill you, right? Another cooking example, or example from the world of food, this is Rene Redzepi and his team of Noma. Here they're standing in a field eating some kind of vegetable. But the point is that they're able to use their smell and their taste and their sight and the feeling of place that they get by being here to make this judgment about whether to take this food and put it in the world's best restaurant, potentially risking their entire reputation, the health of their customers, the happiness of their customers, all that. And they do that on this kind of judgment based on their range of motion and their sensing, right? So that's kind of the point. One last thing. This is a composite image from 20 students who had some scanning done as part of a test in, I think, the University of Illinois. This left half of the image is a composite of all of their brain activity after 20 minutes of normal movement. And on the right image is their same students, same test, brain activity without 20 minutes of movement. And so you can see the difference that this isn't just about using your senses, but this is about how the motion and the sensing sort of feeds each other to increase your general awareness and also your activity. This, to me, starts to look like creative activity, right? So we have this range of motion, and we have these range of senses. And so to connect that back to MR, there's kind of a couple things I want to talk about here. One is the way that you interface with the world based on that, like I said. The second is your ability to see and interact with content, especially 3D content, in a 3D way, the way that we as humans are designed to. And then thirdly, once you take that and you start to explore the places that you can go when you get there. So if you've used HoloLens, you probably understand this, but these kinds of ideas were behind a lot of the design decisions behind HoloLens. It's why we made it uncorded and self-contained, so you didn't feel like you were plugged into a giant box or have to wear a backpack. It's why we made the lenses clear and kept the peripheral vision open, so you didn't feel like you were going to stumble into everything in your house. And it's why we created this spatial mapping and surface reconstruction technology, so that even when you're scanning the environment and creating a full topographical map of the environment around you, the OS and the applications can still run at 60 plus frames per second on top of that. So it's pretty wild stuff. It was really hard. And I think it's amazing to take a bet on something like that human range of motion and human range of sensing and try to work it into a piece of hardware as complicated as this. So I'd like to maybe take a break for just a second and show you guys a video. I made this video last year with the team. It tells a little story about where we think we might be going, and it demonstrates some of these concepts pretty well. So check it out. Oh, we don't have sound. No. Can I have a hand with sound? Should I do this guy? Is it this?
It should have sound already because they're connecting this.
Ooh. I should have tested. No, but it's not coming out of the mini display port. Was that coming from there? Speakers? Are you sure?
That's from the computer. That's from the computer.
That's from the computer.
Can you set it on the computer to do out?
No, it won't go through this port.
Okay.
I need a, maybe I can plug it in through the headphone jack.
Yeah. Plug it into the headphone jack.
Okay,
There.
trying this. Aha. Good.
Sorry, Penny. This may be a bad time, but Glenn is on an earlier flight.
We're so not ready.
Should we start to panic?
Not yet. Just bring the team in, please.
I can see you're hard at work, Samir, but Penny needs your help.
Yeah, sure thing. Just let me check out this bunker real quick.
Samir, Glenn's on.
As per usual, your sense of timing is just awesome.
カイさん、ペニーが呼んでいますけど。
今すぐ行くってさ。Penny?
Hey. Cute.
I tried. So, how's it coming?
It's not. This is the flagship store. It's gotta be unforgettable.
Yeah. Not exactly blowing my hair back.
Yeah, the space is driving me nuts.
Alright. How about a change of scenery?
Welcome to Think Club.
Some inspiration, please?
I'll wait for it.
Wait.
Inspiration comes from most unfamiliar places. I need you, you are memory. Information sent, now lay down your places. What will be, will just be. I will go back to the place where we once saw.
またギリギリなのね。Impressive.
That went well.
So this is part of the mixed reality journey, right? It's like going towards that place where we can use that full range of motion, as Penny did here. We're just at the beginning of it now, but already you can see how Penny and her friends are using that to lay out this space and mock up these layouts in a way that they have a hard time doing in any other tool that's out today. But it's not all just about manipulating shapes, and I think that's a very small part of it, actually. Some of the stuff that some of our enterprise partners are doing, this is Japan Airlines, their work is so crazy complex that without seeing it in person at life size, you really have a hard time getting your head around it. So just being able to see these things at the scale and size as they are in real life can help you make leaps about what you're doing in your job. It also helps you understand how things come together and fit together. This is an image from Case Western University in Ohio. We have a pilot program with their medical school. Seeing these things, seeing parts of anatomy come together and understanding that fit is something that's very hard to do in an abstracted 2D space. Here's another example. Actually, there was a demo at Unity's AR/VR summit last week. This is a company called Scope AR, and they're measuring how quickly people can put structures together in the field with no blueprints, no laser guides, and very little training, just jumping right in and following the holographic guides to rapidly create things. So you can imagine in disaster response when you have an army of volunteers, that kind of thing, how helpful that would be, right? So I got one more quick video. This is from some friends of ours, and I love this video. They've taken this idea of full range of motion to this ridiculous extent. So I want to show you. If you've been a kid, then you understand, I think, this feeling of playing airplane. So that's her driving it around like this. And then, yeah, that's about right. So shout out to Holo Friends and their awesome work. They continue to push the boundaries of the platform in these really unexpected ways, which is just, as a platform creator, is awesome to see. Another thing about this video, in this video, both of Penny's colleagues, her teammates, were able to visit her world from wherever they are. One as an avatar using a VR headset, and one through this kind of 3D live streaming called holoportation. I'll show you a little bit more about that later. That's being incubated in Microsoft research right now. But I think this idea of them being able to visit her world and experience that shows the power of this networking people, places, and things that I talked about earlier. And you know, we're already seeing it. I think every day you can do a search, you'll see more and more 360 videos and photos up on YouTube and on Facebook. It's turning into this major paradigm. And at the same time, we're seeing these amazing high resolution 3D scans with off-the-shelf scanning technology. You can kind of imagine what happens when you bring these things together, like these huge captures and these amazing 3D scans to create an experience. But here's why I think this is really important. This is Marianne. This is my mom, everybody. She's the reason why I think this is all important. No. She might not look it, but Marianne is 70 years old. And not to spoil the surprise for anybody, but as you get older, this range of motion and range of sensing that we've been talking about starts to really change, right? And not only do you have less motion, but you have less energy for motion. And not only that, but the things that weren't challenging before or intimidating start to become more intimidating. So things like going to a place where you don't speak the language, going to a city where you don't understand the layout, going to a place where you don't know people, or trying to interact with a foreign currency, all become really difficult and intimidating. Which is why I was really happy to bring HoloLens back to my family's house for Thanksgiving one year and show my mom this app that we have called HoloTour. HoloTour, if you haven't tried it, is a tour that gives you, or is an app that gives you a guided mixed reality tour of Rome. And this app was made just like I just showed you. It's a combination of high resolution 360 captures and 3D objects set in the foreground, along with some really cool mixed reality accompaniment like these labels and this kind of like strata. So my mom is not a computer person. She's actually never asked to use a computer before in her life. But after I showed her HoloTour, she is, however, a devout Catholic. So after I showed her HoloTour, she asked me 3 times that weekend to go back to Rome, in her words, to show her how to use the machine, how to put it on her head, how to open the application, and how to get back there to experience this again. So this was a pretty amazing moment as a product creator, something that I'm really happy to experience, and something that can kind of further reinforce my conviction about the direction that we're going here. So Penny and her friends also go to this virtual world, this totally made up place that's meant to inspire them and open their creativity and give them some of these objects that at one point fly through the sky as a starting off place for their design. This is one kind of virtual world, but I imagine in a few years there's just going to be a massive number of virtual worlds available for people to go to. So to show you some of that range, I put this picture together. Up here, this one's actually physical. This is a group called Team Lab, and they do these amazing interactive installations in space. This is from Microsoft Paint 3D, if you haven't seen it. Minecraft with some extra shader love, and then Rise of the Tomb Raider. But through all of these things, maybe you get an idea of the breadth and the spectrum of the kind of virtual worlds that we imagine people going to. So my last point about this, with all of these virtual places to go, we felt as a product team that it was really important to give you somewhere to come back to. So we created this environment, just this one for now. That's the mixed reality home, and it's kind of an interesting place. It's sort of the study in contrasts. It's not meant to replace your real home. It's just meant to give you an unambiguous home for when you're using the product, some place where you can come back to and rest before launching off the next point. The landscape here is inspired by the Pacific Northwest. This is about an hour north of where we're headquartered, and the architecture as well. But of course, the place is locationless because it's virtual. Likewise, we have this indoor-outdoor. We also have this kind of like difference between X and Y movement that you have in the physical world and being able to move in Z in the virtual world. So we packaged all of these things up together in this mixed reality home. There's a couple of rooms, there's a garden, there's a rooftop, there's about 50 holograms. This is the creativity room. These rooms are meant to be used with multiple applications at once, kind of the power of an OS, a Windows OS, or some kind of multi-window OS. This is the creativity room, so it's meant to have like big walls and open spaces so you can kind of be a little more free with your holograms. This is, quote unquote, the productivity room, but you can see how even traditional Windows apps can sit in space and be used side by side. So, of course, we all watch Stranger Things, right?
What about the other time? The one!
Okay. So using these different apps is just as simple as moving your attention from one to the next. The other thing that I really like about bringing these HoloLens concepts into VR is that you can take these holograms and put them out in the virtual world, doing anything you want with them, scaling up much larger than the actual physical world allows you to, creating these arrangements. Yeah, it's Seattle. We miss the rain when we're not in it, I guess. So anyway, you kind of get the sense of how really rapidly you could start putting these worlds together with just a simple kit of objects. And then the last video I'll show you of Cliff House is how simple it is to use an app like HoloTour, jumping into that world, which is, in this case, is Machu Picchu, and experiencing some of what is great about virtual reality content. Oh, there's a flood. Okay. And then if you've used HoloLens, then you know the bloom. So the bloom, hit the bloom button, and come back to Cliff House. So I think that these three things, in terms of using your full range of motion and your sensing, kind of point the direction for where we think we want to go in bringing these kind of strictly VR devices and HoloLens-like mixed reality devices together. Okay. That was the first story. Second story is the story about us. So this is the American plains. This is 200 years ago, call it 1817. And on this land, this map, there lived people who spoke about 300 different languages, all spread out all over the land, which makes North America one of the most linguistically diverse regions in the world at that time, which is kind of amazing. But the other thing that's amazing about this was that there was actually one universal language that was spoken by a lot of these people. All of this area in pink was where those people lived. And actually, I misspoke. This language wasn't a spoken language. This was a gestural language. It was a sign language. It was called Plain Sign Talk. And it was a trade language, but it was also a storytelling language. So let's take a look. So it's likely that if he were to actually verbalize, the people on the left and the right of him wouldn't understand what he is talking about. But you can see from the looks on their faces that they are as enwrapped in this story as they were if he was actually speaking it. So there's two reasons why I wanted to bring up Plain Sign Talk today. One is that in the context of mixed reality or virtual reality nerds, I find this really interesting because it's sixed off. The shape, the position, and the motion of these signs all matter to their meaning. For example, tree and grass are the same, just grass is closer to the ground, which I find amazing. The second is that Plain Sign Talk is this kind of amazing emergent design solution across a huge number of people with this crazy different values, different cultures, different languages, and allowed them all to share perspective and to build relationships with each other. So that's the part that I want to talk about today. I want to talk about sharing perspectives, and I want to talk a little bit about how that might overcome some of the cultural and personal differences that we see in the world today. So I'll talk about that from two ways. One is in terms of collaboration with mixed reality, and the second is in terms of discovering new perspectives. So collaboration is super powerful in mixed reality, and we've known this for a while. This is a video from one of our construction partners, Trimble. They do large-scale real estate development, and you can see the kind of collaboration that happens here. I would argue that collaboration in mixed reality is way more powerful than the collaboration that we see on the web, precisely because just like Plain Sign Talk, it allows you, it gives you context of shape and motion, but it also allows you to use that full range of motion and sensing that we talked about in the first story. I'll explain this video a little bit. This is from Microsoft Research. This was the holoportation, the sort of 3D live streaming that I mentioned earlier. This is running right now as a demo, and it's crazy mind-blowing. This guy is a hologram. He's in this other room over here, and he's able to beam in full 3D into this other guy's space, and they're able to interact with each other, right? So the thing, though, is that collaboration in the real world and collaboration in holoportation is sort of bounded in a way because each participant maintains their own sort of unique viewpoint, which means that just like with Plain Sign Talk, you still need to rely on storytelling and communication to bridge the difference between my perspective and your perspective. But we found that's not the only way to do this in mixed reality. More and more, we found ways to actually use the same perspective for multiple viewers, and we're starting to understand what that means in terms of storytelling and in terms of building empathy. So I'll give you a quick example. This is some concept art from a demo last year at E3. This is a Halo demo, and what you're seeing here is something that was a combined physical and holographic build-out. This is a physical room, largely, that they built at the exhibition center. But on this table and through these windows, there were holographic elements, so that as you lean down and you look through the windows, you could actually see out to the top of a planet and spaceships taking off from a hangar bay, sort of flying out to that planet. And as you walked up to this table, you started to see holograms emerge on this table. And you did this in a group of about 6 at a time. So We used your sort of traditional fixed location holograms for some of the experiences, like showing maps, things where you need to build sort of communal understanding of place. But the trick came when we wanted to make it seem like the characters were actually talking to you. So this character is looking directly at you, speaking with you, but because that character is in the same place, each person around the table feels like they're having one experience, but they're actually each experiencing something different. So I think, if we think about editorial and constructing storytelling, we could think about bouncing back and forth between these kind of like fixed viewpoint and sort of view-independent holograms as a new tool for that. So this kind of collaboration is really good in mixed reality. Virtual reality is really good for a different kind of sharing perspectives. This is a video from a piece called Kia. This is a piece by Noni de la Peña. If you aren't familiar with her work, I urge you to check it out. She's sort of a journalist. She takes primary source material, audio and video footage, and she reconstructs these scenes and to put you in various positions that you wouldn't normally find yourself in. So this piece, this is my favorite piece of hers, and I found it particularly powerful. It deals with domestic abuse, and without going into all the gory details, it puts you right in the scene as people are having this altercation and they're waiting for 911 to show up. It's pretty amazing. One of her other pieces is this piece called Across the Line that allows you to follow this young woman as she walks through the crowd who's protesting an abortion clinic on her way to get an abortion. So this is, again, something that, myself, I've never found myself in this situation, but experiencing this alongside with her was absolutely super, super powerful. So please, please check this out. I like this piece for another reason, though, because unlike Kia, it doesn't just put you in that environment with her. For a time in this piece, you actually are in her shoes. And so as she's crossing that line and walking into the clinic, people are yelling at her. They're yelling at you. And you're there, and you pause, and you're forced to react to that and respond to that. And it's pretty powerful. I don't know the word for this. I suspect maybe there is one, but I'm just going to call it transpresence for now. This ability of being able to be in somebody else's shoes and experiencing that. Personally, I believe that over time, this will emerge as a super, super powerful tool for policy making, for social sciences, and of course for design. Like, we always want these kinds of things in design, right? Yeah, not gonna lift up the mood a little bit, not to make light of this, but just to get a little brighter in here. I found another example of transpresence in Conan O'Brien, in this Conan O'Brien clip that I thought was pretty funny. So I'll share with you guys. He's playing a game called Wilson's Heart.
I look gross. I'm old. Okay, I have a couple of questions. How do I make it this all in color?
Well, it's in black and white. The game is an homage to monster movies of like the 30s and 40s.
Wait a minute, I thought the whole point of virtual reality was to enhance reality. And you're saying I've entered a world where I'm colorblind and I'm an old man? Wow, that's fantastic. Do you want to experience what it's like to be in your late 60s and old and chained to a wall with glaucoma? This magical world! I should be having sex!
Yeah.
You can also throw it.
Okay. Oh, that one comes down.
That's like the story of VR. It's like you don't know what's happening, and just like whatever you can do, you do it. Had to keep that in. Yeah, I think like traditionally we would use things like this age simulation suit. That's like this prosthetic that gives you the reduced range of motion as somebody more advanced in years and sensing, of course, with the eyes. But maybe combined with the kinds of things, the kind of transpresence that we have in VR, we can get to new understanding and make better products for people here. So I think whether it's sharing virtual content like this or jumping inside of a story, maybe that gives you guys a little insight about how these things can come together to give people this powerful new tool with perspective. Okay, last story. This one's about me. That's not really. It's about you guys too. Every day, people like me, designers, engineers, business people who are working on things make tens or maybe hundreds of decisions that impact the products that they create and eventually impact their users, right? What I'm curious about is where these decisions come from. I think we all like to think of ourselves as rational people. We like to think that we have this thought process that gets us from A to B or A to C or whatever. So definitely reason is one, right? But we're also forced into these situations where we have to make quick decisions and we don't have time to reason, or maybe we don't have the right data. So that's maybe instinct. And then rapidly you get into this kind of fuzzy territory of things that are really hard to talk about and explain, and that's maybe intuition. So I think these kind of in a nutshell describe our tools for making these decisions, but what are they really about, right? The one that I actually want to zero in on though is intuition. So intuition is hard for a couple reasons. It's hard because it takes a long time to build up. It's hard because it's hard to talk about. It's hard to communicate with somebody. But all that points to this kind of like a master difficulty for me, which is that intuition is limited to a single person. Like, even if you're working with different people, you all may reach the same conclusion, but the way you got there is going to be very different. And so I'm wondering, can we actually co-create intuition? Is there some way of building shared intuition? So like a lot of people in this room, I learned to sketch before I learned to draw, and I learned to float before I learned to swim. And then at work, I learned to draw, usually before like jumping off onto the deep end in a new project. But that's what we do at work. We prototype. We prototype before we invest a bunch of resources and new teams into these crazy opportunities. We try to figure out what pitfalls are there. Basically, we try to get to some intuition about this new problem space. But I think mixed reality in general is a tool for creating intuition, and these are kinds of the ways that I think it does. One is I think it's a powerful tool for simulation, especially simulation new worlds, and using the word worlds loosely. Secondly, it's amazing for visualizing things, and then lastly, kind of extending your sensing into realms beyond just what you're biologically capable of. In terms of the first one, I think anybody who's an engineer or a forecaster or has worked in physics or science in any way knows that computers are super, super amazing for simulation. They're fantastic tools for that. But I don't think there's any better device for experiencing simulation than VR. VR headsets are fantastic for experiencing things. So these are renders from Unreal Engine. They're from a guy named Kulalala, and yep, and they're not quite real time, but they're also not quite state of the art, which makes me think that it's not going to be too long before we're seeing these kinds of simulations in VR systems. In that previous engineering example, every time the engineer runs a simulation, he or she gets a little bit of insight. And over time, those insights build up into an intuition, right? So thinking about that, and then thinking about the kind of perspectives that we can discover in Noni de la Peña's work, I can't help but think about, well, what if we can run these simulations not just for mechanical or physical processes, but also for social processes or for emotional processes or for world processes? And that kind of brings me to these things together, right? What if we wanted to understand something, potentially a decision that we were about to make, and we could run these simulations? And each time we ran a simulation, we got a little bit of insight, and over time, those insights built up to be a new intuition about something. It might take a little while, but I think it's really valuable as long as it's still faster than the real world, and as long as it doesn't come with all the risks of actually acting in the real world, right? So there's a lot of cost to making risky decisions in real life. So I wonder how technology like this could mitigate some of that. But it turns out that kind of mechanical process that I just described is what we all go through all the time when we're running scenarios in our mind. Like if you've ever kind of zoned out or slept on it or daydreamed, research has shown that what's actually happening is your brain is actively running simulations and actively evaluating outcomes. Those simulations are super intense for you. And that's why so many people, when they're doing this, they sort of shut down their sensory systems. And I'm sure you've all had this experience where you're trying to get somebody's attention and they're like super zoned out. Well, that's what's happening. They're kind of subconsciously running these simulations and engaging in some outcome. This happens especially when you're in your late childhood and teens, and you're trying to understand what kind of adult you're going to be. So you're running these things constantly, and sort of, and those things are helping drive your late childhood development, which is pretty crazy. The current examples in VR are much simpler. This is an app called Moteboat. I don't know if you've tried it, but basically you can speak what you want, people, places, and things, and the app will put them together, and then some simulation will happen. This one's about drones delivering houses, but you can ask for anything. You can ask about giraffes eating ice cream in the desert, and that's what will appear in front of you. We have an example a little closer to home, too. At Microsoft. This is Minecraft. Last week, again, at our education event, we announced some new tools for simulation in Minecraft. Minecraft is already used a lot more than I thought in education. Kids try out ideas, try constructing things, do some rudimentary scripting. But, last week what we announced is more code and more code learning integration. So people can in Minecraft, you can actually just write \code and it'll start teaching you how to build these simulations within the world, which is pretty amazing. There's even a little Minecraft guy that comes out and helps direct you on what to do. It's awesome. In HoloLens, simulation can maybe mean something different. Simulation in HoloLens is about seeing not a whole new world, but some things that you can't actually visualize in the real world. It's about visualizing the invisible. So imagine that this is us, and we're working on this thing, and we're at different levels of experience, right? My intuition is going to be different than yours. But when we start to see these things together in mixed reality, now suddenly I have a tool for sharing my intuition with you, and you have a tool for sharing your intuition with me. And we can both see these things in context come together and make a better decision. In that way, I think mixed reality is pretty amazing for education. Just this idea of learning by doing and learning alongside others is a powerful way to reinforce not just what you're getting from it, but also the conclusions that you're drawing and taking away. So I'll play one more video, and it's from our education event last week.
I was tired of preparing kids for yesterday. We were always preparing kids for this world that didn't really exist anymore, and that wasn't going to exist when they graduated. And I wanted to get my kids to the point where they could actually build the future.
We've seen a fundamental shift already in how a lot of educational resources are being delivered. We've seen a shift from print books through to ebooks. And I think the next evolution of that is from books to mixed reality.
As I started preparing my lectures and thinking how I'm going to communicate this to the students, one thing I wished is I had a 3D chalkboard.
You actually have all these tools that allow students to generate content for other students, which means that you can have students that are subject matter experts informing the development of experiences to help teach content that they're learning about in their other classes. And that's just amazing.
With the HoloLens, our idea for an app was if you didn't have access to all different instruments, you could learn them. I think being able to interact with something is what makes you remember it more.
I'm a visual learner. I'm someone who learns by experience as opposed to just reading out of a book. And so having a HoloLens put that visual in front of you makes things much easier.
We could use mixed reality for agriculture,
science classes,
geography.
Math would be a big one.
It provides a much more engaging experience for students, and that's the ultimate goal for a teacher, is to engage the students and have them learning.
Okay, so yeah, intuition. I think in terms of simulation and visualization and then extending sensing. Maybe you can kind of see what I'm getting at, how all these things come together to allow you to not just build your intuition a little faster and maybe a little more reliably, but also share it with other people. So that's the stories. There were 3 of them, right? We talked about how we can instinctively use our bodies and our sensing in mixed reality to experience this world and all the amazing content in it, but also go to other worlds. We talked about how we share perspectives and how it's important to try on new perspectives, I think, especially in this day and age. And then, of course, how we can simulate different outcomes and visualize the invisible to build on them. But, you know, this was all very irresponsible speculation, as some people might say. It's super, super early, and I know you're probably thinking, well, HoloLens is really expensive, and it's really heavy, and I can't wear it for too long, and not too many people have it. I don't know if you remember, actually, I know you don't remember, but maybe you know, the first commercially available cell phone cost more than HoloLens did in those days. It was $4,000 in the early 80s, and it weighed way more than the HoloLens did. Didn't have any apps, you had to plug it in to use it. Also, do you guys know this story? In 1968, Doug Engelbart demoed this thing that was amazing, which was a formatted page of text with magical links that go between them. And it took until 1984 before the first page formatting software hit it big. This is Aldus PageMaker version 1.0 on the Mac, and then later on Windows. But it wasn't for 40 years until we finally had our pages of nicely formatted text that were all hyperlinked all together. And that's when Facebook hit 100 million users. That's 100 million users on the same service. So I don't think it's going to take that long this time around, but I just want to reinforce the message that this is the beginning of a longer story, right? And that was just pages. Like, hopefully something else that you took away from this is that worlds can complement pages. As rich as pages are for telling stories and for showing pictures, they're still kind of in this canvas. And I think a world where you can instinctively move around with your own range of motion and sensing and share perspectives with people are a perfect complement to that. So my own personal prediction is that it's not going to be too long from now until we see just as many apps that are meant to build worlds as we see that are meant to design pages today. And I'm really looking forward to that. This kind of brings me back to our responsibilities as designers and engineers and product people, right? I work on a product team. We do an operating system, so we have to be sure-footed, right? We have to be reliable. We also, of course, go for ease and delight. Like, I think as designers, we all could probably embrace these goals. But in mixed reality, the other thing that we want to design for, I think, is possibility. Sounds a little cheesy, but it's actually not. Because we don't know where this is going, right? We don't know what people are going to create. We try to put our best guests out there, but we want to leave enough room for other people to design and build their experiences. And then we want to leave a lot of room for the platform to grow in the direction that it needs to grow, because we don't have all the answers. So thank you, NYU. You guys have been awesome. Thanks so much for staying late on a Monday night talking about this. One last shameful plug. This week is Microsoft's Build Conference, so there's going to be a lot more news about our universal app platform and our mixed reality, I'm guessing. I don't know for sure. I'm guessing. So watch the interwebs and stay tuned if you're interested in developing for HoloLens or any of our other headsets. So thank you. All right.
Thank you, really, really great talk, and thanks everyone for coming. So we're gonna take a few minutes to open up the floor to questions. And if you have a question, I'll come and bring the microphone to you. You can address Nicholas.
Thanks. So I have a question about the HoloLens itself. Because I think the most common way we use to move an object is not by using our eyes, it's by our hands. And sometimes I feel like when I use the HoloLens, when I use the gaze tracking, the gaze dot on the HoloLens is not that stable. It's like shaking. So why HoloLens choose to use the gaze tracking to move the object to control the object?
That's a great question. Right now, it's really split. In the platform, we have control for both gaze-oriented interaction and gestural interaction. On the OS, like the stuff that we've made, we have split our decisions. Some of our decisions that seem more instinctive about placing something in the world, we found that people tend to move their whole bodies or their heads to find where they want to put something and drop it. In other cases, when they want to rotate something or scale, it's natural to reach out with your hands. So we're sort of in this in-between state. I think what you see in a lot of the applications and in a lot of the Unity code is that split, and it's exacerbated because the implementation is a little bit different in each of the cases. Also, maybe some performance issues that you're seeing with the jitter that may be about the frame rate not being able to keep up. I think in general, right now it's early, and we'll see a lot of things shake out. My best advice is to think about the interaction at a micro level, like the smallest level you can, and if it feels like something where the person is generally moving their whole body to perform the interaction, then consider gaze, because it is a lot more stable and you don't lose tracking as much. But if it's something that's kind of naturally fit for manipulation, then maybe look to hands.
Hi. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. We're actually from the Tisch School of the Arts. We're not from Tandon. And last year we had Sascha Unselt, who's the head of the Oculus Story Studios, come to speak to us about virtual reality and creating content for those headsets. And one of the things that he said was, because he's a filmmaker as well, he said with films it's show, don't tell. But he said with virtual reality it's discover, don't show. And so what do you, like, if you have any kind of like short, I guess, phrase for designing content in mixed reality, do you think there, as you've gone about creating this, is there any kind of, I guess, not rule, but like guideline to keep in mind when creating content for mixed reality?
Yeah, we were talking about content just before this, and I think content is still really tricky. I think what we've seen a lot in mixed reality is not so much that kind of storytelling. I've seen Sascha speak before, and it was amazing. He talked a lot about how, designing for a film, you can just put one thing after another, and that timeline is actually your biggest editorial tool to creating the story. In VR, of course, that's difficult, because if you're looking the wrong way, you completely miss it. It's like suddenly you're designing all of your events to be, instead of time-based, to be gaze-based, which I think is fascinating. Definitely would work in HoloLens style devices as well, but I think the sense of discovery can also kind of come back to bite you, because there are so many things that can happen out of the FOV. So I don't have a great expression for it, but I would propose leading people through instead. What we found a lot of success by kind of like artfully arranging the scene so that the thing you're looking at just kind of directs your eye to the next moment and then to the next moment, and pretty soon you're moving all around the space. I come from a background in painting, and we talk a lot about leading the eye through the scene, and I think about that a lot with HoloLens.
Hello. My question is mainly about the hands, and there's, the Leap Motion is a very popular device that's been paired with VR headsets, with designing interfaces that are not just gestural, but like your full hands in the space. Is there any plans for HoloLens to more seamlessly integrate that? I mean, I saw a project on GitHub about the last summer, that just got started. So, but is there any official, like, integrating, or not just necessarily integrating Leap Motion?
I can't talk about plans, dude.
Not plans.
But what I can say is that HoloLens is a Windows device. It runs Windows 10, and so all of the input peripherals that work with Windows 10 should work with HoloLens. It's probably similar to the project that you saw.
Yeah. Is there other gestures other than the ones that the bloom and the click?
Yeah. I mean, I think from a platform perspective, the slight difference is that the platform needs to produce a gesture that's as reliable as it possibly can be. And so we try to create these super rigorous metrics.
Right.
Our metrics for bloom were more rigorous than the metrics for click on a touchpad on a laptop, just for point of comparison. We try to produce that so that the system can pick those things up and pass those to the apps as much as possible. And we weren't seeing that with the Leap Motion yet. You've probably, if you've used it a lot, you've probably had this experience where it's amazing until it's like, what? And then, right. So that's the kind of thing that I think is the difference between what you can do in a platform and then what you can do on top of it with an application or a peripheral. But the platform job is to kind of buoy those things up and allow you to experiment and build on top of it. So I would urge lots of experimentation.
Yeah. Does the SDK let you build more gestures? Or
what's that?
Do we have to wait for Microsoft to add more gestures into the system?
Into the HoloLens to get to that degree of reliability?
Yeah.
Yes, but I think you can build gestures in Unity. I'm not sure.
Oh, thank you.
Got one in the back too.
Yeah, thank you so much for that presentation. It was really thought-provoking.
Cool. Thanks.
I'm really interested in one thing you talked about, the idea of nonverbal communication. And yeah, I kind of really agree with you in how you're kind of illustrating the best ways to do it. I find myself a lot when people are explaining an idea to me, I just like to sketch it out, so I can see kind of how HoloLens and mixed reality can be a really good tool for that. One thing I'm kind of interested in, or I'm trying to work through some creative projects, is how to help people communicate things that they're not so much aware of, because being able to sketch an idea means you have an idea in the first place. But a lot of times it takes such a long time to get to that intuition or that level of insight, and you find yourself sort of like, kind of like grappling about for these ideas, or maybe things are subconscious and it's shown through your body language and things like that. And I guess less technology specific, but I'm just kind of interested in your thoughts behind those less self-aware thought processes, and have you thought through what are the best ways to become aware of them or maybe communicate them?
Yeah, that's really interesting. So yeah, I'm a big believer in automatic drawing and automatic writing. I think from a technology standpoint, I didn't get to talk about AI at all tonight, but if, what was that game? Scribblenauts? Something like that? Do you guys know that game? It's this game where you have a little character going through a world, and he has all these challenges like, oh, there's a big pool of water and you can't get across. So you're like, a boat? And you type it in, and then there's this boat, if a boat's available. And I think about that a lot in terms of finding ways to augment these kind of like automated or stream of consciousness practices. I think this is a huge area for AI. I mean, we've seen it a lot with robots, et cetera, that there's limited things that we can apply robots to right now and with a lot of success. But if we combine them, if we take a person and we let them do their thing, and then we give them some robots to help them do their thing, then they can get a lot further, a lot faster. And so I think about that with creativity as well. Like if you were there and you could just start talking and those things were to appear in the world around you, or if you could just say like, give me a bunch of blue stuff, and then have a bunch of blue stuff and sort of see what that was, then you switch from having to take on all that work of generating those things yourself into being more of a selector or a curator, and then I think that will help kickstart those processes. That's just my own thoughts on that. I'm looking forward to trying out some experiences like that. If anybody were to build one, it'd be awesome.
Hi, thanks for coming out here and giving this talk.
Thanks.
So you gave two really good examples, the cell phone, and internet, as two really important technologies that really changed how society works. I think a lot of people would also agree that those two technologies had unintended consequences.
Sure.
Has Microsoft been able to see, it might be too early to tell, seen any unintended consequences of mixed reality and been able to like head them off before they become a real issue?
Oh, good question. I think it's a little bit early. I mean, one thing that we were responding to when we created HoloLens is this kind of feeling of isolation that you have from being in your phone. Well, you know, today it's arguably better or worse when you just put this thing on rather than have it here. But I think as you saw in the video and other pieces, like a lot of people working in VR or MR are rushing towards that, that kind of social VR holy grail as a way of hopefully heading off some of those things. But I feel like that's kind of more of just something that we want to avoid in general. I don't know. I feel like it's maybe a little early to have discovered unintended ones, but that's like makes me really nervous all of a sudden. Thanks.
Well, in VR, there's the whole assault issue.
Oh yeah.
Do you see that possibly in MR?
Less. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he was talking about assault in VR. But trolling can get really bad in VR when you don't have like you have more than just text, but you don't have like a personal bubble or physical space or like social propriety to stop you from like having like strange interactions with people in social VR spaces. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's less of a problem in HoloLens style thing because you generally like see them coming. You're like, whoa. But.
All right. So you had a digital assistant floating orb thing, and I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, but like, my question, I guess, to you is like, given that concept video, where do you see kind of AI and digital assistants in mixed reality space?
Yeah. Where do I see them right now, or?
Now or in the future? Yeah.
Okay. Now I can talk about. In the future is harder to talk about. So yeah, we saw some projects today that. One in particular that went straight after this kind of really difficult territory of conversational interaction with AI in a space. In this case, it was for telling you about artists and artist work, which is totally awesome. Yeah, the little AI bubble in that video kind of represents something that everybody kind of, you know, in the industry at least, you see like Siri and Google and Cortana, they're all kind of going there. But right now, I think what's really interesting is thinking about where something like Cortana or Alexa is today, and then trying to figure out what's uniquely interesting about physical space to do with that. I think in your project, there was actually this cool example where the little Navi type character would sort of like lead you around from artwork to artwork, which is great. Like you can't do that on a screen, right? It doesn't make any sense if Clippy's like scrolling your page and showing you different art pieces. But it's totally different if this character can actually lead you through space and engage with you as if they have a body and you have a body and you're both inhabiting the same space together. That to me feels like the place to like look at. Just what's uniquely different about that and what might some opportunities be there. I don't know. There's 3, I think. I count 3. 4.
Hey, thank you. That was really good.
Thanks.
I really loved the merchandising video, the first video that you showed. That was really cool. Blew my mind.
Oh yeah, with the store. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, that was
Thanks.
awesome. But my question is about the ability that you showed to transport a holographic avatar of yourself to a different setting, and you said that like you guys were able to actually do that.
In the MSR video.
Yeah.
Yes. MSR.
Yes.
Sorry, Microsoft Research.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay. How did you do that? Is that something that like is feasible for people to?
I didn't do that. No. I'm not capable of doing that. But the geniuses over in the other building Yeah, they set up these crazy towers with a couple different cameras. It's not Kinect, but you could think of it like a super turbo Kinect. There's documentation of it online, and I think you can probably find, I think they presented at SIGGRAPH or something thereabouts, and I think you can probably find it online. But yeah, it's just basically like a really rapid 3D scanning and then retexturing with the RGB feed, and then presenting it in the same space as the HoloLens user is seeing it. That video, if you search for MSR holoportation, that video is crazy. Like, it starts off that way and it just gets weirder. At one point, the guy has a copy of himself in the room too, which is weird. And then his daughter comes in, she like holoports in, and then he takes his virtual copy and his daughter's copy, and he shrinks them down and kind of like replays the whole room on a tabletop, like this big, and you see them. It's like bonkers crazy. So you should definitely check it out.
Is that something that like maybe like people in offices, like you think like that's something like they're going to be able to do maybe in like a year from now, or like is that a bit down the road, like just for like
time will tell.
Okay.
Who can say?
Okay. Thank you.
So my question is built on Asher's points. So now, like, we use telephones, we use phones, we have all these kind of tools, and then research has been showing that our attention span, or the way we can concentrate, has been shrink really a lot from, let's say, minutes to seconds.
Yeah.
So, and also I saw one of your videos that you have different kinds of windows popping out. So I'm just wondering, like, your thoughts, or how, when you are developing the products, how you put people's attention into consideration,
right.
Whether you feel like this is gonna get worse because of this new technology, or trying to maybe twist it a little, or just have a little different opinion towards this kind of topic.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good one. So that stuff I was saying at the end about this kind of dichotomy of pages and worlds, I think gets to that. Right now, I think, I don't have my phone, but like this thing where like the best interaction on your phone is a swipe is like made for like getting stuff out of your view and getting new stuff in your view, which I find just really kind of feeding this demon, if you will. And so I think about the ability with worlds instead to kind of completely engross you, like, which is kind of why I was talking about Legos in the beginning. I feel like the more you're engrossed in that world, the more your attention is sort of fed and your creativity is fed. I have a very optimistic viewpoint of this, but not everybody shares that optimism. But from me, I think that if we can start thinking about high engagement experiences as sort of a counterpoint to these kind of low engagement, sort of glance and go experiences that we have in mobile phones today, then we're going to be in a much better place in a few years. I think that will help us. I think that it will help the way that we collaborate and work together, and all that stuff I talked about with sharing perspective is kind of a part of that. Go for it.
Whatever. So basically, I'm engineer, so it's like kind of weird. Basically, my question is, I haven't used the HoloLens, so how do you localize your in the HoloLens? Like, you are using the cameras or the IR sensors for the localize yourself? Because when I see the hologram, it should be localized your person to
what do you mean? You localize, like find your position in space?
Yeah, find your coordinate where you are X, Y, Z.
Yeah, there's like a ton of sensors on this thing.
May I tell you what sensors are or how it does work?
Yeah, a little bit. You should look up HoloLens head tracking.
Okay.
And then you'll see head tracking and surface reconstruction are the two that I would look up. It's basically like taking frames of your environment all the time, really, really, really fast. And so we know where your head is in space relative to your environment. Yeah. And then at the same time, we're taking a depth map, depth pass, and so we can understand the topography of your environment as well. And those things come together to create your environment, but also give you head pose and floor location.
So you just need a HoloLens. You don't need any cameras or any other.
Oh.
Okay,
yeah.
Nice. Yeah. The next one
it's pretty
is
cool. You should check it out.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me. It's pretty. And then the next one is the I know you keep saying it's early, but I believe for the VR and MR, you need at least 4K resolution. And for the CPU speed, how do you think how many faster than right now CPU needed to the learning the real 4K or like whatever say the VR in the HoloLens?
To do VR in HoloLens at 4K?
Yeah, in like how many times faster?
I don't know, man. Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to. I did a lot of irresponsible speculation tonight, but I won't irresponsibly speculate that. I think you can probably, with a couple quick internet searches, you could probably understand CPU and GPU where we are today, and then you can probably predict where it needs to be.
I thought you're a professor. I mean, you're computer specialty, so I won't get better ideas. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
What do you see are the biggest limitations of the HoloLens?
Oh yeah, good one. I think. Do you mean about the device itself, or about the format and the medium?
The system, the labor, like who's developing good stuff?
Yeah, that's actually one of the biggest ones. So there's always kind of this balance, I think, in as a platform about device availability and content availability and users on your platform. So you're trying to balance those things out. Right now, HoloLens availability is limited. It's still a little expensive. It's still a little heavy, and there's the FOV restrictions. All of those things lend to its difficulty to develop for. It's also just like VR. It's really costly to develop for. Like you have to know how to do 3D assets. You have to know how to do sort of game development. And so for I think for a lot of developers, especially people coming from a web workflow or an app workflow, it's a lot to take on. So I think you have those two challenges to deal with. And then to me, those are the biggest. Like actually, as a designer, I don't feel quite so constrained by the FOV or the gestural limitations as we talked about. I feel like you can still do a lot just within that. But I would say the biggest limiting factors are just availability and development cost. I'd be curious if you have other ideas or other thoughts, anybody?
I'm just curious how that sort of labor, sort of technical gap is getting cured.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like there's even a drought of available web developers and software people and designers in the world.
Mm-hmm.
As things are getting more technically complicated.
Yeah.
How is that gap getting closed?
Yeah. Did you watch the Unity keynote at all last week or 2 weeks ago? So it was interesting. They did a couple demos that were designed for non-game developers, and there's like all these features coming into Unity, like timeline editing for 360 content, or it wasn't even 360 content. Sorry, it was for changing VR perspectives and playing like pre-composed game animations in like an After Effects type workflow. It was super interesting. So I feel like we're just sort of on this corner of a bunch of new tools opening up to people who don't come from that background. And I think that's, I mean, just like we saw with web and then with mobile, like those kind of tools are going to be instrumental into creating the kind of content that we need on the platform.
In the same way that you described it, in the same way you're describing the whole world and as a platform, that an ideal goal, of course, would be engagement. And in the physical world, that would be shut down of sensory perceptors or focus, or whatever focus that. What I'm trying to get at is what, in terms of the platform builder, that you see as a positive direction towards greater, higher quality engagement in that thought process? Do you ever consider the negative externality of a lot of the same could be escapism in something that's kind of like a Wall-E-esque future of being over-nuanced?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, did you read Ready Player One? Where the guy's like, he spends all of his time in this world called the Oasis, which is like this super highly engaging kind of like Facebook meets video game thing. And he lives in the top trailer in a stack of trailers, and he's pretty successful, so he spends his money on better and better VR suits and that kind of thing. It's actually a great book. It sounds terrible when I'm describing it, but it's a really fun read. So I think that This is just personally, this is one reason why I work on HoloLens and not some other things. I mean, if I had a choice, I think I would continue to work towards technologies that brings these things together rather than technologies that are purely about consumption. I think that when we were talking about storytelling, somebody brought that up in HoloLens. I actually think like creativity in HoloLens is way more powerful than storytelling. And I think that we're already seeing that with some of the, I showed that Japan Airlines and the Packard Trucks thing and some of those other partnerships with construction companies. People are latching onto that. Like people who work in space, in real spaces, and with their bodies are latching onto HoloLens as a tool. It's like, finally, I don't have to like hold this thing up and I can do my real thing and I can interact with real people, but I can get the kind of digital flexibility that I want. So my hope is that we continue to invest these things. We'll close the gap. I think escapism is good and it's also helpful. It lets you explore different things. It lets you sort of figure out what you like and who you are, but hopefully it doesn't become the be all end all, right? Like that would be disastrous.
Related to that, do you have any entertainment companies that are currently working with the HoloLens to create content that's made to be consumed, as you said?
Yeah, that's a good question. We have a bunch of partnerships. I don't know which are public, so I don't know what I can talk about. But one thing that's interesting on that note is that we did just recently launch an experience with Kennedy Space Center, I think. And this is kind of an in situ installation, edutainment or something like that. But it's not so much about consumption at home, it's about entertainment within that space. So that might be something to look at. I think we're, yes? Hi.
So I'm wondering about I'm in the VR world and engagement with like 360 video, but trying to do like real-time 360 videos of like
capture or?
Yeah, like capturing people together, but then being able to move in those spaces and shared environments.
Awesome, yeah.
So I'd like to, it just, right now it's basically an idea, and I have a colleague who's done some of this type of stuff at NYU. But in terms of like sharing, I believe like environments for like a Shanghai campus, I believe it's like what he was talking about. They were in a shared environment in New York and in an off-site campus. Awesome. But there was something that was kind of more CG, and so bringing in like a CG mix with live action, kind of mixed reality world in the VR.
Yeah.
Do you have any like insights into projects that have been able to accomplish that, or where you guys are going with that?
I just saw one thing. It's not a Microsoft thing. It's an Adobe thing, actually. They did. They hit a couple. I think this is SIGGRAPH 2017, but they did from a single like cell phone camera feed. They did stereo viewpoint, and then they also did some sort of limited free motion within that. They were able to separate things out in space and make you feel the parallax kind of within that bubble, all from just the normal cell phone video. So that might be something to look at, especially because as a tools company, they'll probably be looking for ways to surface that into Unity. Unity also demoed at their last keynote something like the HoloTour example I showed, where you could take two 360 spheres, like video spheres or photospheres, layer them together, and then put alpha masks, say, on the front one. So yeah, so you can get the parallax, you can comp in other elements like you would in a standard sort of After Effects thing, and then you can jump from one location in the sphere to the next and get like the relative movement. So it was awesome, and it's like a kind of thing with just like simple tools, 360 capture, and suddenly you're off to the races making these amazing stories.
Okay, we're gonna wrap it up. We'll like this shout. We're gonna wrap it up. If you have additional questions, we'll be around. I want to release the crowd.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Yeah.
For
Thank Thank you guys. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for sticking around. That was a long one.
Great questions, everyone. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Can we try?
What's that?
Is that ready to try?
Maybe. Let me see if it's charged. Should be.
It's funny because I had the same question.
About trying it?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because like we did a presentation this even like last week, and we
Oh, really?
and then the week before we actually went to the Microsoft store on Fifth Ave.
Oh, okay.
And then we were gonna try out one of the try out one, but basically they had shut down the demo site.
Oh, no.
2 days.
So you haven't tried it at all?
No,